to Airdrop, the show that'll help you understand what NFTs are, how to use them, how they work, and all that good stuff. I am Rawion.
And I'm Phosphorus. For any of you who might be wondering what our weird names are, these are obviously not our real government identification names. They are, in fact, pseudonyms. You know, like Mark Twain or 50 Cent.
Wait, Mark Twain is a pseudonym?
Yeah, you didn't know that? Okay, hold on. Let me just show you. Yeah, his real name is Samuel Langhorne Clemens.
Yeah, Samuel Langhorne Clemens would not sell very much.
No, you got to have a pseudonym to rock by. All right, so today we are chatting with two founders of the Blue Chip project in the Stacks ecosystem.
Yeah, we got to talk to Mark and Mr. Zeon from the almighty Megapont.
By the way, if you're wondering, Blue Chip is a stock market reference. It means it's an established, stable, well-recognized corporation. Blue Chip stocks are seen as safer investments with a proven track record of success and stable growth.
Nice. So that's what that means. Megapont is a universe where advanced scientific mutations accelerated the evolution of every species on Earth. Earth is currently a thriving, bustling paradise that has been at peace for a generation.
What?
That's the lore. You know, all the good NFT projects have like lore and backstory to them that like makes it cool.
I get it.
Megapont's first NFT drop was 2,500 pixelized chimpanzees? Apes? Whatever you want to call them. Each of them have different attributes like different hair, eyes, glasses, clothes, and they even have some like famous ones like Caesar from Planet of the Apes, and they have like a Ghost Rider that I think is super cool, and I'm like super jealous of whoever owns that one.
So, Megapont did $1 million in sales in just 5 days. They're the first NFT on Stacks to reach $1 million in sales.
That's nuts. In this episode, we're going to break down like the Megapont origin story. We're going to talk about Web3 and what Web3 is and a whole bunch of really awesome stuff. This was a really, really, really great conversation that we had with them.
And with that said, let's drop it.
The airdrop crew and their guests are not registered investment advisors, and all their opinions are theirs alone. There are risks involved in placing investments in securities, or in Bitcoin, or in cryptocurrencies, or in anything else if we're really honest with ourselves. None of the information presented today is intended to form the basis for any offer or recommendation. This is not financial advice. This show is purely for informational and entertainment purposes only. Enjoy.
All right, we're here with some Megapont dudes. This is super exciting. We have on the podcast today, we have Mark and Mr. Zeon. If you guys want to introduce yourselves, say hi.
Hi, everyone. Firstly, thanks for having us on the podcast. Super excited to be here and I guess talk about NFTs and everything Megapont. So I'm Mark. I guess people see me as the founder or one of the two founders of Megapont. There are myself and Weasley, who's our Russian pixel artist. We were the OG2 who came together and decided to create this just wild and wonderful universe. My background is sort of Web2 going back almost a decade now. Engineering, building tech teams, data science, all of that exciting stuff. I think that's everything you need to know about me that isn't currently available to easily find online anyway.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, and I'm Mr. Zeon. I've spent 20 years in, Web 1, I guess, Web 2, and now Web 3. So I've kind of, seen everything that you could think about on the web, from table-based front-page websites all the way through to what we have now. So, I've spent 20 years online, and I've built, lots of different startups and products, and excited to be on the show, and thanks for having us on.
Oh my gosh, this is going to be so much fun.
Yeah.
Rawion, are you ready for this?
I'm so ready. I've been looking
All right,
forward to this. So, all right, we're going to start off with a question that we want to ask all of our guests, which is, can you explain NFTs like you were talking to a fourth grader? And by that, I mean just like in the simplest possible terms for someone who has no idea what this technology even is.
I mean, I could give it a go, but I have a 6-year-old who asks me, what are these apes? What are these things? And I don't think I could articulate it very well to her. So speaking maybe a little bit more advanced, there's certainly two ways to think about NFTs. One of them is at the pure technology layer, and it's sometimes hard for folks who aren't crypto native or don't understand how a blockchain works to fully understand why there's this cultural significance around NFTs. And throughout history, we've really had a hard time verifying that scarce assets are legitimate, and the the provenance chain of those. You can think to like diamonds and gold for an obvious example. And NFTs kind of solve that, right? It's verifiable, the verifiable transfer of assets on the blockchain. And it's really not just NFTs. I guess you could say NFTs are a nice wrapper around artists being able to finally make a living doing the work that they love. So that would be my succinct overview of kind of what NFTs are. But I think there's a wider cultural sort of answer to this, where I think they are a collective tool for community building, and a very powerful one, which I'm sure we'll sort of discuss the benefits of later down in the show. I'm not sure what Mr. Zeon thinks and whether he has different opinion on that, and he also might be able to describe it in a way that's a bit more primary than that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I think about it. I have kids that are not far off. They're a little bit older than fourth graders, but ultimately for me, it's easier to explain it in relationship to what they would be used to in terms of gaming, right? So my son in particular plays a lot of Roblox, and in Roblox, if you're not familiar with it, there's a lot of purchases that happen in Roblox. A lot of purchases, I can tell you that firsthand, because I'm funding a lot of those purchases. But he's very used to buying access to games and avatars and skins and all these types of things. And when you think about maybe the broader gaming space, things like Fortnite, Call of Duty, depending on ages, you start getting into something that I think is an easier way to talk about the similarity between NFTs and in-game purchases. Now, there is a gap in terms of the technological part that Mark was talking about, but ultimately, I think the easier way of explaining it is, imagine if you had a skin in Roblox or Fortnite that only a certain number of people could ever own, and it became rare. And instead of you spending your money and never getting it back, which is really what happens in the case of something like Roblox, imagine if that skin became more valuable because no one else could buy it, and that you could sell that and go and spend money on more skins, or go buy yourself some sweets at the shop, right? So for me, that relationship with gaming and skins and so on is a really important one. I also think, just to kind of broaden that, it's one of the things that excites me about the future of NFTs, if I think about that side, because, we've got a bunch of kids that are very much used to buying or purchasing through games, assets like skins and so on and so forth. That wasn't necessarily the case for perhaps some of us when we were their age. And so growing up, maybe not crypto native, but certainly understanding that, that these things, these virtual assets, cost money, is going to be really interesting when they are in their 20s, right? So that's how I would explain it, is a Roblox skin or a Fortnite skin or whatever it might be. I think that's the easiest way in my mind to convey that.
I think the gaming story is easy to tell, especially to folks in the crypto world, because there's kind of that idea that Ethereum, Vitalik started it because World of Warcraft changed some of the stats on one of his warlock items. I think it was a warlock item. And he said, they shouldn't be able to do this. And it's quite interesting, right? That was his view. I think he recently debunked that was the reason he started Ethereum, but he kind of admitted that he was really mad that Blizzard had changed his Warcraft item. And I think one of the ways that I like to describe it, especially to gamers, is that imagine when you're purchasing these super rare items, or you're being awarded with them in game for completing a raid or finishing a dungeon or whatever it is, that you can one day not only sell those to other players when you perhaps have finished playing the game, but you can take them away from the game and you can use them maybe in other games. And I think NFTs enable you to do that. And to go off on a little bit of a tangent, these airdrops that we're seeing are really other projects utilizing that Web3 and NFT layer to build a product around something that's already happened. So you can imagine if you were a gaming company starting now, you could look at what, say, World of Warcraft are doing with all of their NFTs and say, I'm just going to build mine on top of it. If you want to bring your NFTs to my game, you can do that. You can use them in there. And that's a really exciting prospect, in my opinion.
Wow. When we talk about explaining NFTs to a fourth grader, I really do think that fourth graders probably will get this easier than my auntie or my uncle will.
Right. Yeah.
Because they are so immersed in the digital world as is, right? They grew up knowing the internet. It always was. Wi-Fi was always a thing. And that's just how they operate. I think of it, you were talking about skins in Fortnite or Roblox, right? And it almost like if I had a suit, like a physical suit, right? I purchase it with money and I can wear it and then I can resell it. It's the same concept, but just for digital assets, for digital items, things that only exist in the digital world.
Well, and I think the big leap for most of us is, like, think about how long it took for e-commerce to become, like, I don't know about you guys, but like, my mom, wasn't buying things in e-commerce on day one, right? Like I was doing a lot more in e-commerce than she was, but eventually, that started to grow, and nowadays you see more and more people using e-commerce like it's normal, and I do think it's a little bit like that. I think that there's this kind of tipping point concept around technology adoption, right? That it becomes more vertical over time. That maybe 10 years ago when the iPhone launched, very few people had it.
Right.
Whereas nowadays, like, the Apple Watch came out and all of a sudden you saw it on everybody's wrist. And I do think that that's something that Web3 as we know it today will benefit from, that, that adoption, if it goes mainstream and can go into those other areas. But it's just, like, unusual, isn't it? Like, I think the challenge with most, like, it's a generational thing. Most people are like, how can you possibly, like, value something virtual that, at $10,000, right? Like, that just seems so difficult for a lot of people to understand.
Yeah. And I have to constantly remind myself that we are still so early in this that I don't think we've even hit the early adopter stage yet in that curve. There's still a lot of people that are innovating and coming up with this.
Yeah.
That leads me to you guys and Megapont. Where did this come from? Where did you say, all right, I'm going to make an NFT?
That's an amazing question. So I'll go back to I guess when I started playing around with NFTs. So I founded a company with a couple of friends called Arcata, and it's a sort of a KYC due diligence platform for let's call it legacy art. Right, so it provides all of the KYC stuff and verifying that the money that you're using to purchase this a very expensive painting is money that you're allowed to use to purchase this very expensive painting. And that business was born out of regulation in the EU. So the EU Fifth Anti-Money Laundering Directive. So it's like a RegTech business. And I guess as early as late 2019, some of our clients had started to come to us and were asking about NFTs and saying, I think this is when some of the one-to-one NFTs were starting to at least make a little bit of noise. It certainly wasn't anything like it is now. And they started to come to us and say, are these assets that our clients are asking us about under the scope of the EU Fifth? So being somewhat crypto native, I had some idea of what NFTs were, but even at this stage, I didn't really get them. And at this time, like, punks were a couple $100, right? So it's a shame.
What year is this?
This is 2020, sorry. Is it 2020? What year are we? 2020, so it's 2020. So late 2020. Okay. Late 2020 to correct, not 2019. It's late 2020. Got a year wrong. I keep forgetting we've just moved into 2022.
Yeah.
So this is late 2020. And things are starting to heat up, and I still didn't quite get it. And I think that's because of my traditional art background, where I put so much emphasis on the value of the physical piece, and it was staring me right in the face, that verifiable sort of provenance of what the blockchain provides us of ownership and of the I guess it being an original piece, which is a real problem in the art world. It didn't click for me at that stage. So I kind of stuck around in that traditional art world. And then it started to click around, let's say around April, May, when some of the communities started picking up around NFTs, right? So then I started to think these are a sort of much more, and you kind of think back to 2020, even things like punks didn't have huge communities of followings. You started to see these communities being built around the NFT, and it immediately reminded me of things like country clubs, right? So I think that's an obvious example that everybody uses. And then it made total sense. It's like a transferable country club membership in many ways, some of the sort of earlier popular NFT projects. And I stuck around the space mostly as a passive observer. I've been in crypto since 2012. So I kind of also had the mindset, I don't really need to chase this latest, greatest thing. I'm quite happy with how I've profited from crypto all this time. But I was passive in the communities. I was picking up an NFT here or there, taking part a little bit. But I still had, I guess, those real traditional Web2 commitments, i.e. a full-time job. That meant it was always a nighttime. I'd pop onto Discord for a couple of hours. It was mostly Twitter at this time, actually. And then the tipping point for me was maybe sort of July, August. It was getting involved with one of the, I guess, the community DAOs that was being set up by a lot of the Bored Ape members to try and acquire the Bored Ape lot. I think it was from Sotheby's. It might have been Christie's. So I apologize if I'm misquoting one of them here. I'm almost certain it was Sotheby's at the time. It was the first one. And due to my traditional art background, we had a bit of a connection there. We kind of knew the KYC stuff inside out. And we really were just advising this group of apes around how they could structure a bid for that. Unfortunately, it wasn't successful. But that's when I really started to understand the power of the communities within NFTs. Within sort of 48 hours, they had hundreds of thousands committed into this Juicebox DAO, ready to bid on this lot, and they weren't bothered about who's profiting from this, what's happening once we've acquired them. They just wanted to acquire them and worry about what was happening later, which is remarkable, I think. And I made the decision to try and build a community from the ground up, and I think that was one of the goals around an NFT project. And I'd certainly at this point made quite a few connections where I could have leveraged those and shilled a project, probably to mint out at the time as well. But I wanted to do something a little bit different, and I set out with a couple of goals. This is in I guess August, of finding an artist that hadn't had any successful exposure to NFTs. Was kind of knew what they were and was happy to play around with them. Had a portfolio that spanned years. They'd work with multiple parties. They're not just an artist getting into the space to make a quick buck. Mm-hmm. And someone who was just really passionate about art. So I was hunting for artists, and at the time, I think every artist in the world was asked to create an NFT project. And Weasley, the artist on Megapont, was similar. And I think his first response was no. I think he said no to me. I don't want to do this. And then my persistence of going back to him with a plan of how this would be different from like an Ethereum cash grab project paid off. And we started bouncing ideas around. And the apes is an obvious choice, I think. Why the apes?
Yeah. Why the apes?
Why the apes?
There's so many apes.
There's so many apes.
They're everywhere, and it's. I mean, I love it. I personally love apes. I have little like gorilla and ape trinkets around the house, just floating around, much to the dismay of my partner. She absolutely hates the things. Not apes, the trinkets. She's fine with apes, just the trinkets. I think they're so like as like an animal object. Like they are very human-like in their emotions, I think. So I think artists are very are able to articulate multiple I want to say like styles to an ape that kind of makes sense, right? So I think you can give them sort of sad emotions, happy emotions. You can kind of clothe them, and you can really play around with a primate, and have a lot of fun with it artistically. I think humans have been obsessed with primates for a while, to be honest. So I don't think it's anything new. I think it was a bunch of artists thought, okay, this is something that we can take our artistic sort of approach to, and this kind of branches off to culture in many ways. If you think like, why not a dragon? I think it's much harder for meme culture in particular to put like a dragon head everywhere, or like a dragon body somewhere. And you look at Bored Apes who've done this brilliant. There's so many like, hilarious memes and GIFs of Bored Apes doing various things that just fit. It's funny. Stylistically, it looks great. And you could probably just equate most of the ape collection to the fact that Bored Ape were here and were doing really well. Like to be honest, it's follow where the money is, and the money for a long time in NFTs has been with Bored Apes, even on punks. Right, the ape punks have always been near the top of the ceiling. So we kind of followed that approach just because the artist was not wanting to build a generative human collection for a number of reasons. I think that the number one reason being it would just be too long an endeavor. And we were kind of, our goal originally was to launch before Christmas. And he wanted to do something that hadn't been sort of done before in whatever chain we launched. And there were no real ape collections on Stacks at the time. So we went back and forth for weeks on the apes. We have so many early iterations I'd love to show one day that just look, I don't want to say horrendous, but looking back, they look really odd now.
You look back on your art, that's always going to be the case. You're like, oh gosh, that's so awful.
Those day one iterations of the Megapont apes, so they're kind of looking back now that they look almost robotic. But yeah, so it was almost an accident, right? Me and Weasley were just sitting there and we're like, let's see if we can make apes that look really good. And, we kind of just ran with it. And it's interesting because a lot of our one-to-ones in the collection are apes, but they're not in culture elsewhere. So we have like characters from Pixar movies. We have a character from the Destiny, the game where some of the team met. So it's very easy to apply an artistic direction to an ape as opposed to say something like a fish, which is a little bit more difficult. So that would be why apes. But other collections, I'm not sure. I think it's just chasing the money, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
People
So
just going where the money is.
Yeah.
I did some Googling, and you're gonna have to like prove me wrong on this, but I think the apes. So when in crypto culture, when you ape in,
yep.
that's when a cryptocurrency trader buys a token after the project just starts without conducting any research. That's called aping in, right?
I think that sums up most collectors in every NFT project.
Which is why the apes are first in my mind. I was like, oh, that makes sense. That's why there's apes everywhere, because, I don't need to think about it. I'm just going to buy it.
I think this is like, there's two parts of that. So one, I think of like the film Planet of the Apes, right? So like,
so good.
That was first done in 1968, right?
Wow.
And apes are like more human-like than any other kind of similar creature. So I think like Mark's kind of, I mean, I don't know the true story of why apes, but I think the Planet of the Apes thing is an interesting one because you get that connection between, apes and humans, and that feels more like, can you imagine the same film but Planet of the Dragons? It's not going to work.
No.
Right? Like, and there really isn't any other like films or culture around a similar kind of thing. So for me, I think that's why apes were more obvious, because they're more human than anything else, and therefore it becomes easier to almost see yourself in them in a sort of different perspective, right? Because that's the trouble with human NFTs, I think, is you almost have to have it look like you.
Yeah.
Whereas with an ape NFT, you kind of don't want it to look like you. You might want some kind of trait that is similar, but not necessarily the same. So I think it sort of gives us this kind of, slight dimensional similarity, but not quite the same. So I think, for me, I think that's that might be where the apes thing comes from. And then like personally for me, if people are aping in on a project, like I view that as buying more than one and sort of making a larger bet. Now, I think that terminology will change depending on who you speak to. But for me, like if I'm aping in on a project, I'm probably buying, a few at least.
More than you should, right?
Money.
Yeah, more than you should.
Yeah. So whereas I think if you're just aping in, if you just buy one NFT, didn't do any research, I'm not sure that I believe that's, like, personally, I believe that's aping. And I think that's just maybe being a bit silly. But like if you buy 3 or 4 because you really feel like this project has legs, then I think you're aping in, right?
I think like meme culture with apes was kind of evident with Harambe, right? That's
right.
when it became obvious that, okay, anything that goes on with like an ape, you can very easily kind of turn it into a meme. And that as a meme exploded, right? I think we can all remember that. So maybe you just had a bunch of artists and creators thinking, okay, like we know that this is going to take off. Let's just run with it and see what happens. Maybe a lot of it was by accident as well, right? We could be sitting here with the sort of the board kitties yacht club, right? But it's apes.
What do you think? You just said something really interesting there about meme culture. Do you think meme culture and NFT culture are related in any way?
It's a difficult question to answer, and I assumed so, right? So I think before Megapont, I truly believed that the success of a project, for a large part, came down to how easy it was to turn into a meme in popular culture. And we had like the meme channel in the Discord, and really, outside of maybe one crazy night back in October, no one posted any sort of any memes in there. We've probably had a handful, maybe a dozen of high quality memes produced. We've put them in newsletters and things like that. But for the most part, we haven't forced that generation of memes. But I do think it's important in many ways. And some collections just do this better than others, but it's certainly not as important a signal that I maybe once thought it was. I think that would be my opinion on that. It's not going to determine whether your project is a success, but hey, it can certainly help in the case of Bored Apes, right? It's evident that the sort of the memeability of those apes has helped it greatly grow into popular culture.
And I think if you ask the question, how many people that own an NFT are participating in meme culture, you might find that the answer is a significant portion, right? So I think it's less so maybe, or there are some projects that maybe are getting marketing, let's say, out of memes, but I think it's more that certainly from a who are the people that buy NFTs perspective, I think that memes are certainly something that those people understand and are often, privy to, maybe they don't always make them, but they certainly understand them. They use them. They communicate with each other with them from time to time. So I suspect there are, high relationship between the two, but perhaps not necessarily, like Mark said, based on success of the project or something, but rather I think it's more that the mentality of the people that buy NFTs probably means that they also participate in that kind of meme culture.
Yeah, there's something to be said about the community aspect, I think, of the two, as how memes can translate ideas and then people can grab onto those ideas and find a community that way. And I think you're seeing the exact same thing in the NFT space at the moment. So I got a question about Megapont itself. Where did the name come from?
So the answer to this is it was from the artist Wheezy, so it's original brand. And it's just a play on words, and I can't for the life of me remember the play on words, mostly because one of them, he's only ever told me the Russian equivalent, so I have no idea what it is, but it's some kind of just generic metaversy name that he'd thought of around a decade ago, actually. Wow. So, he's been actively trying to build this sort of dystopian metaversy world for a very, very long time. He's got that kind of artistic mind. and we just said, let's run with the name. Hey, branding's hard, right? And at the time, I didn't want to think of a name and think of a brand. We did have to buy the .com domain at the time, which was quite expensive, as is any .com domain. But it was easier than thinking of a brand and trying to come up with like a brand mark and a logo that we were happy with. And it kind of just rolls off the tongue as a nice brand name. So we kept it.
And it does have that dystopian vibe.
Right. It definitely gives the right feel, especially when you the name next to the images of the apes, which I think are just incredible. They're like my favorite, one of my top favorites at the very least, NFTs to look at, because they're just so cool looking, you know? There's a lot of tryhards out here doing their best, but yeah, it doesn't look that great. But Megapont, just, they look awesome, like every single one of them, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's all Weasley, right? I can't take any credit for that. I guess I could try and take credit for directing him in the right way, but hey, he's the super talented artist there. And I think he's a prime example of just a really talented artist who, so his background, he's worked with the likes of Apple, with Hermes, with really large global companies as a contractor, right? And I think most artists working this way. And I don't want to say he's been underpaid for his work there, but in comparison to NFTs, he certainly hasn't had the financial payoff that he has received from NFTs working for a company as large as Apple, right? Which is wild to think about that you've got a bunch of artists working for the largest companies in the world, really being paid an amount that isn't too dissimilar from minimum salary.
Yeah.
So it's kind of not hard to see why artists are jumping into the NFT space. And, you know, you see this on Twitter. There's a lot of artists who perhaps get pushed back, and they just come out and say that at the end of the day, I'm earning a factor of tenfold more than I would anywhere else. This is my passion, and I'm getting to work on my passion and be paid a fair amount of financial payback for that.
Right. I mean, things are changing very obviously, and it's really great to see that things are changing for artists and seeing them be able to just get paid what they deserve and get like some real appreciation for their artwork.
A lot of the time, it's not even the money for these artists. They've not been given a platform to build a community around their work. And I remember really early on in Megapont, Weasley's English isn't great. That's why you don't see him everywhere. So, he's picking up the nuances of the language, but sometimes it's just he has to rely on translators and Google Translate for a lot of the communication. But he would spend all morning, he said, when he woke up, just looking through Discord when we would share like a one-of-one early on in the process. And he would just read every comment where people are sort of praising his art and saying how awesome it is. And, you can
so
kind
cool.
Yeah, and it's not hard to see why that would be such an adrenaline rush for an artist, right? So you've worked for all of these years as a faceless employee in a large organization, pushing out art that's used in marketing materials. And now all of a sudden you've got hundreds of people every morning praising your work. I think it's super powerful, and it's a drug, right? Having that kind of positive feedback loop from the community when you're sharing work. Like he loves it. He animates components for the robot factory that we'll maybe talk about later on. And I think he does it just because he likes to see how the community reacts to it.
That's fun.
Because it's just fun to do that and see the community to hype it up.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, speaking of the way things are changing, Phosphorus and I are pretty new to this whole thing. We're trying to figure out how it works, and that's a big reason we're doing the show. And in our research and our learning that we're doing, we're hearing a lot of people say, NFTs are ushering in Web3. And I've had some conversations with people about Web3, and explaining that is kind of this huge ordeal, right? Because we're really, it's breaking a lot of people's brains just trying to understand what Web3 is. So, how would you explain it? Like, talk to us about Web3. What is it? How is it going to change things? Like, just give us the lowdown on Web3.
I can give you my succinct answer. So the way I would describe it is an opportunity to redefine how the internet economy works, provide more ownership to the users of it, and reward communities for participation. And then the decentralized part is really, securing a future where individual corporations can't control access to all of the above, right? So for me, at least, I think what's changed over the years, and maybe it's almost coming back on itself, right? Like in the early days of Web 1, if you want to call it that, there was quite a lot of freedom. The internet was quite an expressive place. There wasn't the conformity that happens now, and there wasn't really a lot of companies operating on it. It was very much a kind of, Wild West, let's say. Lots of, multicolored scrolling text across websites and mainly filled with personal websites rather than corporate websites. And then obviously I think, Web 2 sort of came, and, the way I look at that, notwithstanding the technical constraints, but was a more business-led approach to the internet, really realistically owned by the likes of Google and Facebook and others now, I would say. And internet providers have, quite a substantial amount of control potentially at their disposal. And then, with Web3, there's this technological advancement, which is really allowing that perhaps initial version of the internet to come back alive again, where it becomes, more in control for the communities themselves. And I think we've seen quite a lot of evidence recently around this reward for community participation piece, with the likes of the airdrops that have been going on around the SOS and Lux and ENS and all these other things. That is, in my view, people have never had a situation where by owning a domain name on Web 2, you get free money. Like, that's not a thing.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I've never
For
experienced
sure.
that on Web2.
No, me neither, right? So so it's a really odd one in the sense that I still have some concerns about, how that cycle really benefits, long term. But it certainly calls to the way that Web3 thinks and operates, right? It is more about community reward, spreading perhaps more of the economy around. And when you kind of put the I guess the finance side of how the internet works much closer to to things, it all becomes a bit more integrated. Like having a wallet that's a browser extension, very easily accessible, and in a few clicks you're able to buy the NFT that you want. But that's very different than what we've been used to in Web 2. And it's taken a hell of a lot of time to get it as good as it is today. Like nowadays, if you're using a website that has Stripe, it's a pretty painless exercise to buy something online. But it wasn't always like that, right? It was really bad in those early days. It's taken a lot of effort. And I do think that, it for me, like I've seen this kind of cycle before, and it is interesting to think about it longer term, but for me, it is ultimately more control, a more community-oriented economy around the internet, and less control or censorship, I guess, in some senses that corporations might have on the internet today. That's the way I think about it.
Yeah, I think you mentioned Lux, the airdrop Lux, which is for those who don't know, it's the token behind the marketplace Lux Rare that's recently launched. I think that's I've been openly bullish about Lux Rare over the last 24, 48 hours, and a lot of people ask me why I'm so excited, and I think it epitomizes Web3, really. It's certainly where we are currently anyway with Web3, and it's a decentralized platform where the participants are reaping the financial benefits of the platform. It's kind of like what everyone assumed OpenSea would one day do, which makes me super excited. For those who don't know, a bunch of people were dropped, airdropped a token, the Lux token, and it was based on your activity in the ecosystem, right? So people who had been trading more on OpenSea received more of this token. And the immediate thought for a lot of people was to, okay, I'm going to sell this token, and for, it's $5,000, it's $1,000, it's free money, there's that saying. But I think a lot of people missed the mark on what the token really was. And that's why even today you're seeing the price increase. And I think you're seeing a lot of really influential individuals in the crypto space started to talk about the project and why they're holding the token. And for those who don't know how it works, it's essentially an open sea where the holders of the token are going to be paid the fees from the platform, right? And when you think about that for a moment, it's really confusing. But it incentivizes the original team to really develop and build something remarkable, because their medium of payment, i.e. the token, is completely worthless if the platform doesn't succeed. So their payment is through making sure that everybody else, the community as a whole, is reaping the rewards of the success of the platform. So they get paid if the community gets paid and if everyone involved is being paid. So they're sharing the success of the platform. They're almost giving out this dividend of success. It's not that they're thinking of a more manipulative business way to make some money and scalp from crypto investors. They're really just pushing this Web3 business model almost to its max that we're kind of seeing right now, i.e. we're only getting paid if everyone gets paid. And, you know, I think that's a great example of sort of Web3 in action. I think it was Chris Dixon that said, I think the quote was, we've took a wrong turn with Web2, right? These walled gardens with ad models everywhere and you don't own anything. And whether you like some of the individuals that have been sort of blacklisted from social media or not, it's still remarkable that you can essentially be shut off from Web2, right? If you think about it, if Google were to suspend your account along with every other social, such as Twitter and Facebook, you'd be in a pretty dark Web2 space, right? I'm not quite sure what corner of the internet you'd be able to use in a functional manner, right. Which is crazy. Right or wrong, it's insane. It's my data. I gave you all this data. You've monetized that data and you've made a fortune. And now you're saying you're taking that away. And Web3 really solves that, where you, the individual, own your data. And an interesting example of a Web2 company masquerading as Web3 could be OpenSea, right? They really use that Web3 decentralized layer for their functionality, but they're applying Web2 thinking. You know, if an NFT is stolen, they will blacklist that NFT so it can't be traded on their marketplace, which is a very Web2 thing to do. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just very Web2, you know, saying, okay, I'm taking crypto holder A's word for it that you've stolen his NFT, and as such, you can't trade it on this marketplace. Whereas I think the future is more decentralized and trustless, right? I think we'll start to see a bunch of trustless protocols springing up, entire startups. Like Facebook, for example. I think the world would be a much better place if Facebook was founded in Web3. It will probably be too difficult to go back on some of these things, like the big social networks. I'm not sure how we reverse that damage, or even produce a Web3 social network that scales. But yeah, I think there was an interesting startup, and maybe Zeon can recall the name of it. I remember when Twitter shut down their API back in sort of 2012, 2013, and there was that Twitter sort of esque cloney startup.
I'm trying to remember. It was like remember the name of it. Sure,
Phosphorus maybe. It was a paid Twitter almost, and there was a bit of a. Yeah. I guess it was way ahead of its time. I can't remember the name of it now, and it's gonna bite me all day.
I remember signing up to it.
Yeah,
but I'm like Googling now, seeing if I can
remember the name. But it was almost ahead of its time. I think that was kind of like a Web3 project without the Web3 infrastructure in place, right? Where they were saying, okay, the owners should own this data. That this social network is built for you, but the data on it is owned by you, the individual. And you know, we're not going to sell that data. And almost everyone, even, you know, my grandma will understand the idea of selling my data is bad. So almost everyone universally agrees with that. Everyone just accepts it as a way of life now. And it never used to be this way. And I don't think particularly it will always be this way. But we're still in that kind of dark age where, okay, you sell my data, and it's, you know, when we hear about these sort of government leaks where they're snooping on individuals, most of the press will just say something along the lines of, you know, we have nothing to hide, then why be worried? I don't think it's a case of I have nothing to hide. It's just a case of, you know, this is mine. It's my data. Like I want to keep it private. I own this. So I think if I was to summarize Web3 in one statement, it's really the consumer or the web user taking ownership of their data and their assets in a way that means they truly own them.
Yeah. What do you think Web3 is going to look like practically? So for the regular internet user right now, I am on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and I'll go buy a rug on Amazon. Like, what's that going to look like in Web3? And we can go into like dream mode if you want to, and it's like, well, it could be this, What do you think that's going to look like for your average user once Web3 is a more popular thing that everybody's using?
I'll branch on one specific area where I have some knowledge. I think commerce is a good one, and maybe Zeon will jump in on this after me as well. The next, I believe the next big sort of Web3 breakthrough will probably be in commerce. And I mean, here's a good story. There's a lot of people who wanted to buy into Megapont in the UK, and they were trying to acquire Stacks, which is the currency of the blockchain that we launched on. And their bank, for example, wouldn't let them send a payment to Binance, right? So it's blocked. I can't buy Stacks, and there just really was no way to purchase that. And then vice versa, you have a large sum of crypto, and you cash it out to your bank account, and then you find that your funds are kind of frozen, and you have to justify where they've come from to spend them. Mm-hmm. Whereas in crypto world, I could just spend them wherever I want. No one cares. I could send Phosphorus 10 ETH. No one cares. He's going to get 10 ETH. Whereas if I want to sort of spend $30,000 on something, maybe a car, quite often you'll have to provide source of funds. Your bank will ask where these have come from. And you start to really understand that even that sort of that foundational layer of finance, that you don't really own your own money. And there's that joke, when as soon as you put money in the bank, it's the bank's money. It kind of is true for the most part. But you really don't have full control and authority over something as basic as your earned wealth and earned money. And I think commerce and crypto will probably be a big play in 2022 and in Web3, where you'll start to see merchants just avail the Web3 checkout, right? I think it's a matter of time now before you see really popular merchants accept MetaMask as a payment source, which isn't really MetaMask, right? It's your wallet with a nice skin on top of. Right. And I think that will be when we start to see a bit more adoption, i.e. the checkout experience for using a Web3 wallet like MetaMask is arguably better than you find on Amazon these days. And that's insane to think about, right? Amazon have one of the most optimized checkout flows in the world. They spend billions making sure that everyone is spending the most they should be there. But a Web3 wallet, I go to a website, I find something I want to buy, and I click a couple of buttons, sign a transaction, and there's the transaction complete. So I think commerce will be the stepping stone for a lot of individuals. And like thinking dream world, I would love to see Web3 social networks be a thing. I think I'm sort of, I guess I use Twitter so much. So it's odd for me to say I'd quite like Twitter to not exist, but I would miss it more than the next guy. So I would like to see a real solid attempt at a Web3 social network where the users own their data. I think it could be quite interesting. I have no idea what that looks like, and I think it's a difficult problem to solve, but somebody will solve it one day.
Yeah, the issue of somebody of in Web2 companies made money off of our data. They advertised to us, and they made a crap ton of money that way. Just they knew more about me than I know about me from observing my online behaviors.
Scary, right?
Right. And now I saw this on Twitter, but it was like in Web 1, it's insert username and password. In Web 2, it's connect to Google and Facebook. And in Web 3, will be connect to wallet. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah. I think that is pretty much spot on. I think authentication as a mechanism that using Web3 is again a nice use case.
And I think that, like, the way I think about it is, in order for it to win, it has to be invisible.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things it's rather than thinking about sectors being disrupted or individual items, that I think in reality it's going to be a whole bunch of things that people start to use without realizing that it's Web3 backed. I think that's where you get mainstream adoption. Like, no one really cares that, for example, Facebook is built on cloud computing. Cloud computing is a pretty, a pretty great advancement when it comes to Web 2. But no one really cares, right? Like, fundamentally, it's more about what value you get from using Facebook or Twitter or whatever, rather than, the infrastructure behind it. And I suspect that, we're so early that we think it matters that it's on the blockchain and so on and so forth. But that's not really gonna, be appealing to the wider audience. So, the reality is most people are gonna need it to look like and feel like what they're used to. What goes on under the hood is not really their concern. So I think obviously at the moment the biggest challenge for anybody is the onboarding experience of Web3 is pretty bad for a normal internet user. The people that are in it today are more than likely, their appetite for beta software is perhaps higher. We're maybe a bit more risk takers in general. But you're not going to get your mom or your grandma installing MetaMask in their browser, right? That's just not going to happen. So it's going to
I'm
need
going to try. I will try.
Yeah, well,
You gotta try.
Yeah, you gotta try.
yeah, but like think about like just getting I remember having challenges like convincing people to use their credit card online.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like you gotta like, I would always remind people to think back of all the challenges that have happened. Like, imagine even just getting people to use mobile phones after landlines, digital radio versus terrestrial radio. Like, don't forget that, there's always going to be these kind of, I guess it's like the crossing the chasm kind of stuff. If you read any of that, there's these segments of the market that are like, we're in this early adopters phase, and I still think that has a while to go. But in order to break out of that, we're going to have to make things more seamless, and people are going to be using Web3 without realizing it. That's when I think the true value is going to come out. I definitely think it will redefine how e-commerce works, how shops will work, how payments will work, all of those things. I've been listening to a few different podcasts and getting intrigued and excited about self-repaying mortgages and all these kind of things. Like, these are things that you just like, oh, yeah, I can't imagine that, like you have to like go, like, and it's intriguing, but everything needs to go mainstream. And I think we've seen this with other technology that, and things need to look the same. If you think about where the iPhone is today versus where it was when it launched, like, it looked more like a regular phone back then. They had to have certain design choices that were made really for to keep it as mainstream as possible. Now they can be outrageous. Now they can have you answering phone calls on your bloody watch, but they wouldn't have got away with that back when they launched, right?
Right.
And so that's the way I think about Web3.
I saw that early photo actually of the iPhone. I'm not sure if you folks come across that. It was kind of doing the rounds on Twitter this week, and it was joking that at the time the iPhone had no app store, it had no turn-by-turn navigation. It basically was a phone, really. It had a couple of apps, and it was mostly like SMS, call, and some basic utility. I think I remember when the iPhone first came out, and everyone was so excited about having the fake lighter app, right? That was one of the first apps. Yeah. And I was like, this is incredible. And I think we're there.
Concerts, phone up.
Yeah, exactly. It's the fake lighter. It feels like we're there with NFTs and Web3 at the moment. Yeah. It feels innovative and great, but we're still, that saying, we're still early, and I think we are still really early in terms of the technology.
Yeah, the one thing I think that's different, and I think this is what you see in technology adoption in general, is it will happen quicker, right? Like, we are early, but the chances are that it's not going to take 10 years for it to go mainstream. Because in general, technology is adopted way faster. And the mechanics of the internet aren't changing drastically with Web3. Like, we're still looking at websites, we're still buying products, we're still like going through a checkout process. It feels a little bit different, weird, but like, if the UI UX guys get on top of that and make that feel a bit more normal, then I suspect that adoption, will be much easier. I think that's certainly a big difference. And I also think, when you think about these cycles of technology adoption, dot-com boom and all these kind of things, what tends to happen is you got a bunch of people who've been through a couple of cycles of how technology can really impact the world, and they are getting, they can really kind of bring some experience, I guess, into the Web3 world and help, kind of elevate that a little bit more, and it's just like, lessons learned, and we're having to do less trial and error now than ever because cloud computing exists. That wasn't there when Web 2 was out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so all of the, we've got more power to deploy these things. We've got the blockchain up and running. Everything is more, is already kind of more advanced than it would be when you consider when the internet launched to where it is now. So I definitely think it'll happen quicker, but I think that, for me, I think there's got to be this physical link as well, in terms of how we get Web3 to work offline in a sort of, traditional setting. I think that's a challenge for, Web2 a lot of times, QR codes being a great example of something that in the last 2 years has went from, I've had countless conversations, 3 years plus ago of QR codes being completely useless and everyone hating them and blah, blah, blah. Like, think about the number one technology probably being used nowadays. It's QR codes, right? What a resurgence that's had. It's probably more popular than the iPhone when you think about it.
I can't go to a restaurant without using one anymore. It's
exactly.
just, it's everywhere.
Yeah. So, but that's that adoption thing, right? Like, think about it, like QR codes went from absolutely no one cares about it and why do these things exist, how do they work, I don't understand, to every single person in the world probably knows how to use a QR code, how to scan it, and what it does in a very short space of time. So these things, they can be forced upon people and they can happen really quick.
Right. I mean, a day in this NFT crypto world feels like a month, and that's been a hard thing to adjust to coming into it. Is like, oh, we have this idea, then somebody does it the next day and the idea is trash, like it is no longer useful. Like everything is moving so fast in this world, it's crazy.
Yeah, you got a lot of smart people working on it, which again is different, because a lot of the technology is there are differences in the underlying technology, but there's a lot of similarities to what's been going on in the technical side of things over the last 5 years, right? So I feel like the barrier of entry for the average engineer in particular is much lower in Web3 than it's been in any other iteration of the web. And that, coupled with artists in particular right now being able to actually be heard and seen and benefit from their work properly, is a really good mix. But I do think that artists are just the kind of starting point, that it's visual, right? And I remember, like, as I said, back in Web 1, like, it was very visual, right?
Right.
It wasn't the best visuals, but there was a lot of bright colors and scrolling text and crazy websites, because, we were in that stage where it had to, like, look interesting, look different. I think that is probably a phase that will wash out over time, and other things will become more dominant as the web as Web3 matures.
Yeah, I saw a tweet the other day that was saying something like, if you look at the average NFT buyer, it looks like they like art from 6 and 9 year olds.
Yeah, I saw that.
Because
Yeah.
it just looks crazy. But you just said that, Mr. Zeon, just about how we have to grab attention somehow, and
it's a sheen over the top of something relatively kind of technical, and I think that's like we've certainly, I've had discussions with people about well, what's the utility, what's the utility of this NFT, and I have a very kind of like stark view on this, which is the number one utility that anybody wants out of an NFT is that the value goes up.
Right.
That is simply it. The reality is most people, I think some people buy it for the art, but I mean, I think you've got to be in a fairly privileged position to just buy it because you like the look of it. The majority of people, I think, that are here and trying to be early are there, are seeing the financial incentive to be early, and they're trying to make sure that they benefit from the upside in any way they can. And for those people, I think the art is certainly something they're going to want to see something nice. But the reality is most of them would be happy buying something that looks like trash, but increases in value. Because no one's going to be like,
Right.
yeah, well, I don't care that I couldn't make 60 ETH because that looked like trash, and so I would never have bought it. Because no one's saying that, right? Everyone wants to be part of every project that's successful, regardless of the quality of the art, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So this leads me into the people who are buying in now want it to be financially viable and successful. And I heard a rumor somewhere on the internet that Megapont was trying to do a bridge to Ethereum and go multi-chain. Can you guys confirm this rumor? Deny this rumor?
Yeah,
Give me some details.
So we yes, it's a short answer to that. And I guess if we take a step back and think about why we're doing this, because obviously, so for those who don't know, we launched on the Stacks network, our project launcher. It's been wildly successful on Stacks. You know, we've built an absolutely incredible community, and it is home. And a lot of people believe we're doing a lot to help improve the Stacks blockchain and the NFT projects and grow other projects. But really, it comes down to the same problem that I guess any new blockchain or newer blockchain would run into. And it's Ethereum, for the most part, controls the keys to the kingdom when it comes to NFTs. And it's not just the liquidity layer, it's the user, the wallet, the number of wallets that are in Ethereum. It dwarfs any other blockchain. And really, it's thinking from Megapont, who, you know, we want to stay on Stacks. We love Stacks. We're not going anywhere. Our home is Stacks. But it's how can we entice folks to come over? And there's been a few projects on Stacks that have done relatively well at that, but no one's really brought huge numbers over. I think obviously Bitcoin monkeys. I think Byzantium actually told us this. I'm not sure if this is totally correct. So I hope that if they're listening, they don't come and hunt me down if I get this wrong. That Bitcoin monkeys had done more than any other Stacks project to bring new wallets to the space, right? It was some crazy number. So they had like more new wallets minting than any other project on Stacks. And there was also sort of CrashPunks who brought across a lot of new wallets as well. But we're not bringing over enough new wallets. So we've got this generative mint coming up on Ethereum. And I'm going to reference Bitcoin monkeys here a little bit as well. We have half of the mint allocation, so there's 6,000 NFTs up for sale on that Ethereum mint. Half of it is going to the apes and the robots currently in the project. You know, if you've got 5 robots, you get 1 mint pass. If you've got 1 ape, you get 1 mint pass. And the reason that we do that like that and not say it's per wallet is because what we found is our apes will just move their assets to different wallets. So we're long past the days of trying to stop them doing that. They will do it no matter how difficult it is. So half of the mint allocation goes immediately to the current holders. And then half of the allocation is outlined in the blog post released on Friday is public sale, which is really unusual at the moment. And I think the reason that Bitcoin monkeys were able to attract a lot of wallets over to Stacks is because it was a public mint. They had no whitelist. And as far as I can remember, it's the first project in a long, long time on Stacks that had done this. And one of the benefits of that is you provide a project for a new wallet to buy into, right? And almost every project now, even on Ethereum, has a mint pass. It has a whitelist. You have to be in Discord. You have to be engaging in the community. You have to be doing something. I think some of the times it's so obscene. You'll be baking cakes. You'll be getting tattoos. You'll be making derivative art. It's wild. I don't understand how communities are just jumping through hoops nonstop to get these whitelist spots. And
it is hard to get into.
It's hard, but
I can't stand it either. And I think Mark's the same as me. Like, I just don't have the energy to go shilling other people's projects all over the internet. I think it's very disingenuous, you know?
Yeah, and
for sure.
It's not, I mean, I say it's mental, but it's easy to see why. There's a financial incentive, especially on Ethereum, right? So you see NFTs instantly selling for sort of 4 to 5 times above the floor price of the original mint, which kind of incentivizes people. And I'm pretty sure now there are farms set up on various websites that will farm multiple whitelist spots on some of the popular projects for you. So we've got the public mint because of that reason, right? We want to provide a buy-in for new wallets into the space, to buy into a project that has a roadmap, has delivered on a prior roadmap. You know, we would be considered, I guess, a blue chip on Stacks. I know on Ethereum we're certainly not a blue chip, but you know, we want to deliver on a roadmap that potentially has us becoming a blue chip on Ethereum. And you know, it would be great to be one of the first sort of multi-chain blue chips. And we really want new wallets to look at the Kongs and be able to buy in there. So we're looking at it like that in terms of the public mint. And, you know, our efforts aren't on getting people into our Discord to bake us cakes and get tattoos and chill on Twitter. You know, we'll put those efforts to sort of ensure that we're doing things to keep the gas low in the contract. There's all sorts of posts around the internet now about how you can drop various aspects of the Open Zeppelin contracts to make sure gas is kept low. You know, we want to disable sophisticated bulk minting from smart contracts. There are mechanisms to do that now. So you have to be minting through MetaMask, which kind of slows down bots being able to pick up the mints. And you run into a situation now where it's really difficult for a bot or a smart contract to mint your project now, which just opens it up to regular folks. You know, you might see a gas spike, but if gas is spiking 0.1 Ethereum, it's less than you buying for 5 times the mint price on OpenSea instantly after mint to a flipper.
Right.
And I had an interesting conversation with someone on this who said he struggles to understand why the community is so hostile towards paying miner fees when they'll happily pay scalper fees. And I was like, you've got a really good point there. The miners are securing the network, the blockchain, and actually providing a service to everyone. They're maintaining it. It's staying alive because of them. Whereas a scalper is just, you know, has no intention of making the project healthy. They just want to get in and out and make a profit. That's all they want to do. So yeah, we got the public mint there. The goal is to build a community, and to build a community that then comes over, looks at the OG Megapont apes and thinks, these are the genesis of this project. These are where a lot of the future utility lies. I'm going to come over to Stacks and pick up one of these. So really it's also executed on my vision that I don't think a single blockchain will win.
Right.
I've been I was on the CoinDesk interview a couple of months back saying this, and I think every blockchain will have its use case. And I sort of see Stacks as this vaulting layer. You know, its transactions are sort of secured by Bitcoin. They are anchored to Bitcoin blocks. And I view it as that layer of a blockchain where you would kind of put your Bored Ape to just sit in the vault for 6 months. I'm not using it anywhere. It's secure there. I know it's secured by Bitcoin, and maybe there are going to be sort of some DeFi products in the future that will yield me Bitcoin for having my NFT there. And Ethereum is doing really well at the metaverse layer, right? The projects like the Sandbox, there's a lot of funding going into various sort of gaming projects on Ethereum. And Ethereum is quickly becoming that metaverse currency. So
Right.
there's probably going to be a lot more projects that are multi-chain. And I think 2022 will probably be the year where we see a lot of investment in bridges and protocols that make sure you can move assets seamlessly across chains. So really, we're just trying to get in early at that part of what we think will be the next stage of Web3 development.
Yeah, there is something to be said about not just being just one chain maximalists. And you're going to see that. I want to see that with wallets too. I don't want to. Right now, it feels like that Web 2 version again. When I go someplace, it's like, ooh, sign in with MetaMask, sign in with this, sign in with that. And it's like, why? I just want one thing.
I totally agree. Like, why do OpenSea not support Solana NFTs, for example, or Stacks? It doesn't make sense to me. I don't know the answer to that. It certainly isn't technical. When you've got that much money, you can solve almost any problem. It feels very odd to just say, okay, this big group of folks on the internet and in Web3, we don't want your business, we don't want your communities, we don't want you here. And it's a bit tribal. It doesn't make sense to me.
And I think the thing that we're also trying to foster, I suppose, is that we think that there is not enough projects launching on Stacks, right? There's not enough good quality, well thought out community building projects launching. And equally, the ones that do launch are in some cases not always selling out what they've got. And so, you know, we're in a fortunate position where Megapont is quite a well ahead of most projects in terms of the volume that is being traded and so on and so forth. That we feel like we can use that influence a little bit to pull people in and show them that Stacks is a really nice space to be, and it is very different from a community perspective than
It's so
Ethereum.
different.
And I actually think a lot of people on that side of the fence would really enjoy it over here. And I think that's what we're trying to do. It's less about us being on Ethereum, more about trying to find a way to pull them over to this side of the fence and show them that there are more options out there, teach them a little bit about the Stacks ecosystem, and hopefully that brings more liquidity in for other projects, not necessarily ours. But, people are attracted to Stacks. They're looking at other projects. We want to create, as Mark said, have more wallets in the ecosystem. And in our view, that benefits everybody. Like it's not it shouldn't be the case that Megapont is so far ahead at this stage. Like it's not really a scalable kind of space for the NFT projects, right? Like we need to see other projects also kind of, filling those other spots that are available, because it's quite a, there's quite a big gap between Megapont. I guess Bitcoin Birds is the next kind of higher tier project, and then there's a huge gap between the next project on the list. And so, for us, that means there's a lot of space to fill. Hopefully we bring more liquidity in. It benefits all the existing projects, fosters new projects. It's us, paying it back, I suppose, to the Stacks ecosystem. It's less about being on Ethereum, more about how do we pull people over.
I think that's a really nice way of putting it. And there is this tendency in the NFT world to sort of be very tribal about the project you're in. Even on Ethereum, right? I think going back a couple of months into the summer, it was, are penguins going to flip apes? Is this going to flip this? Is this project better than this? And you're not restricted. It's not a zero-sum game, the NFT game. And maybe we've even been a bit guilty of this, of not really using our position within the Stacks community to push other projects as hard as we could do. Part of that is you're really assigning your brand and your name to those projects. So it's do I want to risk our reputation on pushing something that might eventually be a rug? But Stacks is quite unique in more projects are doxed with individuals that are coming out with the real name. This is what I do. This is who I am. Than almost any other chain, right? The core projects on Stacks, when you think of us, when you think of Bitcoin Birds, of Crash Punks, of Project Indigo, of Bitcoin Monkeys, all of these projects have very doxed teams. The monkeys are doxed. The Bitcoin Birds, the full family behind the project is doxed. Crash Punks is supported heavily by the Stacks Accelerator, and Grace is obviously very doxed. Indigo in a similar situation. So maybe those projects feel the need to do that because we kind of set that precedent. But it's one that I like as well. Teams coming out and saying who they are, because it minimizes the risk for rugs. So we all need to be better in the Stacks ecosystem at ensuring that we share the wealth. And there was a great podcast that I was listening to recently where I think Kevin Rose had said that Web3 is a little bit different, because when creators or founders of projects are reaping the rewards from their community, they're reinvesting it into their friend. Mm-hmm. They're buying their friend's work. They're investing into their project. They're buying this NFT. And I think that's mostly true. The money doesn't generally leave the ecosystem. Like, people aren't selling a Bored Ape for 80 Ethereum and running off with it to the bank. In some cases, they probably are. But for the most part, they're reinvesting those funds. And even if it's not 100% reinvested, they're investing them maybe in a new project or in a new artist or in a new founder. So that's super powerful, and I hope we see more of that in Stacks this year, of us all getting behind new creators and really helping them in any way that we can.
Yeah, together we're all gonna make it. Exactly. Exactly. What's just to follow up? What would you like to say to the Megapont community, just as we wrap it up here?
Oh man, our community is absolutely awesome. I think it's very like Zeon said, it's very different to almost any other NFT community that I've been part of. It feels more sort of seasoned, crypto seasoned, and maybe that's because of the Stacks blockchain itself. And it was one of the reasons we decided to launch on Stacks. The community felt very young, very sort of mature, well thought out. There was no sort of bickering or fighting between projects. It's probably a more mature crypto native crowd, and that might be why. And because of that, we've got this very strange Discord vibe as well. One example I like to use...
Strange in a good way.
Yeah,
though.
strange in a good way. One example I like to use for anyone who comes over from Ethereum is you go to our other projects channel, right? We've all been in NFT Discords. We go to that channel and it's just full of the latest, greatest spam project that has been paid to be shilled, right? Nobody goes to those channels anymore in any of the communities because it's just full of junk and garbage that we don't want to see. But in Megapont, for the most part, it's community members who are building projects or involved with projects. And we've never had to sort of delete spammers' messages or ban spammers or anything like that. It's just a beautiful community to have the opportunity to lead. And I'm super excited to see what other projects the community launch in 2022, right? So we've got a lot of creators in there, but always happy to support the apes in whatever they launch and give them support in any way that we can.
That's awesome. Anything you need to tell them about or explain that you got coming up or anything along those lines?
Yeah, well, the Ethereum generative mint is super excited. Obviously, there's a lot of hype around that. We're super stoked about that. Excited to see what kind of new wallets we bring into the project, and our roadmap is just stacked for 2022. It's probably a podcast in itself. We'd love to come back again and speak about that one time. But yeah, we're most excited about that really because it's the first time that we're going to be expanding the community significantly since our first mint. So taking aside all of the other utility, which is, I guess, great for apes, it's most exciting to welcome a lot of new members into the community and really see how we grow and what happens from there. As a project leader, there's nothing more exciting, right, than seeing people come in new to the space, absolutely stoked to potentially join. So yeah, really, really excited to grow the community.
I mean, we're on that boat too. We're all about inviting people in, making it easy for people to get involved. If people want to get in contact with Megapont, easiest way is Twitter, I'm guessing?
Yeah, Megapont NFT on Twitter. The Megapont Twitter handle is owned by the artist. So you feel free to follow him, to tweet at him, and he'll probably just direct you to the NFT Twitter because he doesn't want to sit on Twitter all day. So that's the way. Or just jump in our Discord, discord.gg/Megapont.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. And I want to hear how the Ethereum release happens and all the lessons you're learning from that as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, look forward to updating you in that and in due course.
Awesome. Thank you for having us. That was fantastic.
Yeah, this has been an amazing conversation. Megapont is like at the top of my wish list of NFTs that I want to own. Hopefully I'll be able to do it before they just like skyrocket, get completely, out of my reach. But it's been a great conversation. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us.
I feel honored to have Mark and Mr. Zeon talk to us. I personally am so excited to follow this project.
For sure.
So, Raoyan, want to give me one key takeaway that you got from this episode?
I think my biggest takeaway is probably how Web3, at least at the beginning, is going to look a lot like Web2. It's the back-end stuff that's going to change. And it has to. Like, it has to be familiar to the world at large. Otherwise, people aren't going to jump on and they're not going to participate. If regular people don't get on board, it's not going to work. It's like any kind of product, even the computer back in the day. At first it was just a bunch of nerds that wanted to figure out how computers work. And it was like, all right, cool. Enjoy your hobby. It wasn't until, the personal computer became a real life thing that people could understand and get on board with that it became as successful as it was. And now it's just a part of everyday life. So I think that was a really cool point that they brought to the table. What about you? What did you get out of our conversation?
I'm just thinking so much about Web 2 versus Web Web3 and what that means. I feel like the internet that you and I grew up on, right?
Right.
It's very much Web2, where there were platforms, creators, and then consumers. So, you know, like your big three, your Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. Like that's the internet for a lot of people. Side tangent, I'm so sorry. But you know how like in the 70s they had like 3 TV channels?
Yeah.
You had like CBS, NBC, and that was like it. You're like, that's it. Well, now we have the same thing with the internet. It's just Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. We need to get rid of that. And I think Web3 is going to do it, right? And for these platforms, we create for them, and then they make money shilling ads off our data.
Right.
Whereas with Web3, it starts with the participants, and together we make content, and that turns into a platform to which everybody who participates in benefits from.
Right.
And hopefully those benefits are financial, which in turn means we own our data again and can profit back on that. At least that's the wish.
So not all of the money is going to the platform. Creators are making an appropriate amount of money, and even the consumers are making money. Everybody's winning, as opposed to it being like, we are here consuming this creator's content who's getting some like loose change for the work that they're doing, and the platform is making bank selling ads to us.
Right. I'm just so glad we get to learn from these people and just learn out loud.
For sure.
So we can just see it all. If you want to see more, you can find us on Twitter at airdrop_XYZ. Give us a shout out. We'd love that.
And yeah, we're a brand new show, right? So if you would please leave us a dope 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, subscribe on Spotify and YouTube, and do all those things.
You know, all those platforms.
And please share this with your friends that want to know more about what NFTs are, how this whole thing works. Share it with your friends that want to know more. And yeah, we'd appreciate it.
And as always, be excellent to each other.